So earlier this week, liberal Democrat Anna Eskamani made news here in the state of Florida by boldly proclaiming in a press conference that your children were her children, or better yet, your children were the state's children. Now, that started a firestorm here in the so-called free state of Florida. A lot of conservative leaders hit the airwaves, they hit social media saying, no, no, she couldn't be further from the truth. Your children are your own, parental rights, all this and that. But ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you, we still have a long ways to go here in the free state of Florida because we're going to be talking in this episode about a specific case that's currently pending before a Florida court in the Florida Panhandle, where a child was forcibly removed from her mother almost 2 years ago. We're talking missed Christmases. We're talking missed birthdays. This child is literally growing up without her mother. And what was her mother's crime? Why was the child forcibly removed by DCF, the Department of Children and Families, from this mother? Her crime was that she dared to disagree with the opinion of a medical doctor. So, was Anna Eskamani right? Are your children truly yours? Or does the state have the final verdict on what becomes of your children? Let's get started.
We are taking KENLEE with us. Okay? Now, you can handle this one of two ways. You can show out and you can act a fool and you can make this difficult.
Or can my friend Jamie take her?
Stop. Let me finish. Don't interrupt me. You can show out and act a fool and make the situation worse. Or two, you can calm yourself, ask your questions, and then help us get her stuff and walk her to my car. The option is yours, but either way, make no mistake, she's coming with me tonight.
Why?
Because of the treatment you've refused and because of the doctors.
I'm not refusing treatment.
Don't interrupt me. That's twice.
So welcome to today's podcast, Making Waves here in the state of Florida, what I used to call the free state of Florida, but now I call the somewhat free state of Florida. There's a lot of craziness going on in the healthcare world nowadays, and it's not just isolated to the state of Florida. In the last week, we have seen all kinds of crazy things in the news. We heard about the hospital up at New York University refusing care to plainclothes policemen who work for NYPD because they mistakenly thought they were ICE agents. Not that that should have anything to do with anything. You guys understand, when we're all in medical school and we're all getting our training, we take care of drug addicts, we take care of hookers, we take care of all types. There's not supposed to be any sort of discrimination whatsoever when it comes to your health care. So again, it shouldn't even matter what the occupation of those agents was, but they were refused care, or at least their care was made difficult in New York City. You had that. You had this viral video that was on TikTok. It went just viral on TikTok and Twitter of a nurse down here in Florida, down in Boca Raton, bragging about how when Caroline Levitt goes to deliver her baby, she hopes that Caroline Levitt tears from bow to stern, or so she said on a viral video. And again, what the heck is going on here? As a nurse, you don't ever wish ill on a patient. I mean, these things should go without saying, right? But yet here we have this awful behavior, and it's all exhibited on the left, right? It's always the leftists that say these horrible things. It reminds me back during COVID, the horrible things that you had certain doctors and certain nurses say during COVID about how if you didn't get your child vaccinated, maybe you don't deserve to have kids. Horrible things. And that's a time in our history that I'm very ashamed of. And we are definitely not going back to 2020. We're not going back to the COVID restrictions and the COVID brutality and the COVID discrimination, just the absolute horror of what we lived through in 2020. We're not going to take how people acted then and move it forward to 2026. So these nurses, that are discriminating against patients, these nurses that are talking ill about conservatives, that they better not show up while I'm working, or this is gonna. I mean, this is beyond the pale. These people do not belong in healthcare, and to make matters worse, we've got issues here in our own state dealing with medical freedom. I'm going to bring on a guest here, and we're going to talk about a case in Santa Rosa County in the Florida Panhandle, a case where we have parental rights clashing with the wishes or the advice of a medical professional. So, who wins in that regard? Well, you might be surprised. It's a tale that I think will shock you. It's a tale that I think will tell you that we still have a lot of work to do here in the free state of Florida. This is a particular episode that I hope is being watched by our beloved governor, America's freedom fighter, Ron DeSantis. I hope Lieutenant Governor Jay Collins gives a listen, because I think when you hear the story of this poor family and this poor woman who has been separated from her child now for almost 2 years, what did the woman do wrong? She did not follow the advice of a doctor. She questioned the advice that was given to her, advice that, in her opinion, ran contrary to her daughter's own experience. So that's coming up here in just a second. And we're actually going to have an interview with someone who has been following this story from the outset. You might know him as the Free Floridian on Instagram. I know him as Nathan. Let's go to the interview. So by now, you've all seen the body cam footage. You all know why we're here today and what we're talking about. So at this point, I want to introduce my first guest. You know him as the Free Floridian on Instagram and social media pages. I know him as Nathan. Nathan, I've got to be honest, if not for your reporting on the subject, I and most Floridians would probably be oblivious to what's taking place right here in Republican red Florida. So, Nathan, welcome to the podcast. And most importantly, thank you, thank you, thank you for shining a light on what's happening.
Well, thanks for addressing it. It's one of those issues that it's kind of complicated, and a lot of people, when they first glance at it, they're like, oh, well, this can't be actually happening. But the more you look into it and realize there's a fundamental issue going on here, and it's not just in Florida, it's across the nation in the way that we handle these types of cases. So it's I'm glad, I can't say I'm glad that that I'm talking about it, but I'm glad that we're able to bring this to light. And I will just say that it was not really even me. I can't even take credit originally for it. That someone else, one of my followers, mentioned it to me. They live down somewhere in South Florida, and they were like, hey, have you heard about this case? And I'm like, no, I haven't. So I looked into it and started coming up and doing my research. Because again, you don't want to stand up for someone who's actually in the wrong, right? That's one of your worst fears. You don't want to stand up for somebody who's actually deserves to be punished. So I did my due diligence, did my research, and then I'm like, wow, this is something that is more prevalent than we know, as well as it was just, not too far from my my doorstep. And I'm like, well, I have to do something. So just wanted to bring this subject to light, and I'm glad that so many people have responded to it and realized that this is wrong.
Well, and again, keep it in mind that, most people in Florida, they have their own lives, they're going about
Yeah.
their business. I want you to educate everyone who may not be familiar with this case. What exactly is the story as you know it here in the Florida Panhandle?
Yeah, I'll just give you a summary of it. And again, specific details if you want to go to so the mother in the case, Joy ZURAFF, she actually did a podcast where she listed probably about 2 hours discussing the entire story of what's going on. And maybe you can link that in your show notes and stuff. But that really laid the framework. And it's a long podcast, I get it, but it has a lot of important details if you care about the details of how her story went down. She recently had moved to Florida, and this is kind of one of her first experiences in our state, to where one of the doctors in Pensacola was not so. Okay, so let's back up a second. So she's got two kids. She's got two daughters. One of them has cystic fibrosis. So obviously, it's a chronic condition, has a lot of complications. They can, people with that kind of condition can have productive lives. It just is a little bit challenging to them medically. So she goes to a doctor trying to get the proper care for her daughter. And there are certain recommendations. One, that the doctor, I guess, doesn't want to really treat her daughter. So he basically says you need to find someone else. And she ends up doing that. And also, I guess, in the whole mix of things, that there was a certain medication that this doctor or had been recommended to her. And that medicine was, not only was it super expensive, I think $300,000, but also it has a potential side effect of death. Now, we live in the free state of Florida. We became, notorious, we became famous for that phrase because we believe in medical freedom here. And so if the mother has a different desire for the treatment of her child, then that should be something left up to her. Her child was not in a life-threatening situation based on all the evidence that I've seen. And even some of the discussion around it, I'll get to that in a second. But so the mother chooses a different doctor. Apparently, this other doctor that I think was from Sacred Heart Hospital in Pensacola doesn't like that other doctor, doesn't think he's qualified enough or something. So anyway,
Wow.
turn of events, and the doctor from the doctor that didn't want to actually help her child, based on, again, this is based on the research I've done. This is not firsthand knowledge, but her doctor or that doctor ended up reporting the mother to Child Protective Services, Department of Children and Families. Now, again, there was not an imminent threat to the life of the child. The mother was not physically abusing the child, based on everything that I've seen. That all of this primarily stems from the medical freedom that the mother wanted to specifically do a different type of treatment, one that was be more tailored to her daughter. And so,
So
go ahead.
so do I hear you properly? Is this a case where DCF was reported, or they were called in on a child with no evidence of trauma? I mean, this child didn't have cigarette burns put out on her arms or anything like that. This child didn't have broken bones. This was just simply a medical disagreement over a treatment plan?
Yeah, based on all the evidence, based on what was shared in and I've seen, again, I tried to do my due diligence on this, that there is not that accusation. That is not even being put forward, to my knowledge, by the state in trying to make this argument. Specifically Department
Wow.
of Children and Families. And I'll separate them from the state because they are an arm of the state, but at the same time, they also are they've almost become a separate entity, to where they have pretty much free reign in what they do. And I want to actually stop here and say that this happened almost 2 years ago. Okay, it doesn't matter what kind of case we're talking
Wow.
about. Almost 2 years ago in this March, she will have had her daughter was taken from her. And so just imagine that. She was 5, the daughter was 5 then, she's now 7. So that's 2 years of your life that you don't have your child with you. And again, not because of cigarette burns, not because you've been beating your kid. And in fact, the body cam footage, I will just say that she kept a much cleaner house than probably most people watching this video actually have. But it's shocking to me. And this isn't the first time I've come into this kind of situation. It was a couple years ago. There was someone that I knew of over in Idaho, and their Child Protective Services had a similar type of thing. That one of the young couple, they had a little baby, and that baby had some kind of chronic illness that caused him to be underweight, and ultimately the child was taken away by CPS, and there was public outcry against it, which got the media attention on it, and ultimately the baby was given back to the family, only primarily because of the pressure that was put on him. All the charges were dropped. There was nothing against the family that actually stuck. All of the things that they were accusing the family of initially. And so that's, I think, a similar issue to what we have here, because you have a child that is not, and again, if you, I think the body cam footage too is something that is really interesting, because when you look at that, and if you think you're gonna play a clip on here, that what they talk about is, oh, she needs a lung transplant. Well, she never ended up getting a lung transplant. They let her later backtrack on that. And also, to my knowledge, the medicine that they were saying that this girl needed, her little daughter needed, they didn't actually give that to the daughter for several months after they took her away from her mother. And that was one of the reasons that they cited as, we're taking their daughter away.
Terrible. Well, and you mentioned a couple things there that I want to backtrack to. You mentioned about the Department of Children and Families. I want to be very clear in this podcast. I mean, you see the hat that I wear around town. I am a huge fan of our governor. I'm a huge fan of the Republican Party, the people we currently have running the show in Tallahassee. So this is not meant to cast aspersions or cast a bad light on the people that I love and I trust. But you mentioned it earlier. You talk about these organizations, these big departments like DCF. It's a beast unto itself. I would imagine the head of DCF probably does not know the daily workings that goes on in a place like, say, for example, Gulf Breeze, Florida, or Destin, Florida. So again, you're talking about a huge bureaucracy. If anyone's going to take this footage and run with it and act like this is somehow my governor's fault or the fault of the people that we trust our lives with here in Florida, they're sadly mistaken. This is the deep state. This is bureaucracy at its worst. And people like you, Nathan, on your social media and what we try to do here on this podcast, we have superheroes that work for us in the Florida legislature and in the executive branch in Tallahassee, right? And when you activate superheroes, if you want Batman on the case, what do? You light up the bat signal. And that alone is what we are doing. That is my job. You mentioned about how this thing has dragged on almost 2 years now. So when is Joy getting to appear before a jury of her peers?
Yeah, so that's one thing that we believe in here in America, is the right to a speedy and fair trial. Well, for one thing, I don't consider 2 years a speedy trial. For another thing, you asked about a jury trial. It's very interesting because a lot of people don't realize that in Florida, in Florida, when it comes to being sent to prison, you cannot be sent to prison for more than 6 months without a jury trial to state prison. But when it comes to having your child taken away from you permanently, losing your parental rights, you don't get that same privilege. You can have your child taken away from you, all without a jury trial. Now, why do we have a jury trial? The purpose of a jury trial is very simple. The same reason we don't have a king in America is to disperse out that authority, and so that one person doesn't usurp and act like a tyrant to take away someone that they have a vendetta against. It's to even out the playing field, to have a jury of your peers. But when it comes to having your child taken away from you, it's treated like a civil case, not a criminal case, even though they kind of, in practice, it's basically you're accusing this mother, parents, whatever, of a criminal action. And it should have a jury trial, because if you don't, again, you end up potentially with a judge that just does what this, CPS wants. And I'm not accusing this judge. Again, he hasn't ruled yet. So hopefully she will get a fair hearing. But I think a fundamental issue that we need to fix here is not just this one case, but the entire system that we need to require in order to have your kids taken away from you, which I think anybody would choose 6 months in jail over having your child taken away from you. 6 months in prison over having your child taken away from you. But if you can't get 6 months in prison without a jury trial, you must be required to have a jury trial to take someone's parental rights away. That's something that lasts a whole lot longer than 6 months.
Well, and I tell you what, that's another one of the injustices that we're talking about. The fact that one man or one woman has all the power in their hands, and they could strip this mother of her parental rights forever. And like you say, that is a big problem. Before I let you go, I assume you've seen the body cam footage. You know, we're putting it up as part of this podcast. We're putting up excerpts of it. You alluded to it earlier. The way this mother conducted herself. You have, I don't know, like 3, 4, 5 people, including sheriff's deputies at her front door. Uh, I assume she was with DCF. The woman who kind of took charge basically said, whether you fight me or make this easy or make this difficult, make no mistake, I am leaving with your child tonight. You know, I'm not sure how I would have responded to that. I don't think I would have been as calm,
Yep.
cool, and collected as the mother. And again, this isn't footage that I obtained. This is footage that's freely available on YouTube. All you have to do is do a search on YouTube, and you can find DCF, KENLEE,
Yep.
ZURAFF, Navarre, Florida. It's right there, body cam footage. The other comment I wanted to make and get your reaction to. So they're taking this child away because, medically speaking, their argument is she's in bad hands. You got a mother who is not caring for her medically. Did you happen to notice, Nathan, as they're taking the child away, the group of 5 or 6, they were totally dependent on mom for instructions. They go to her and they'd say, can you give us all her medicines? And did you see how meticulously mom was laying out nebulizers, pills, liquid? She said, this one's 4 milliliters, and you gotta freeze it when you open it, gotta refrigerate it. I mean, you're talking about being so meticulous. You even had one of the DCF officials saying, what is this? Is this a shot? And mother had to kind of look at him and say, that's a nebulizer. That's a nebulization solution. You've never seen one before. So it was obvious to me, and probably to anybody with common sense, that this mother wasn't getting prescriptions and just throwing them away. This mother had a very, very strong working knowledge of what was going on with her child medically, more so than the people that they expect us to trust the child with. And I was wondering if you caught on that as well.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, if anybody watches the body cam footage, just the total apathy and disrespect that mother was shown by the Department of Children and Family staff. Honestly, it's unprofessional in any regard, but especially when you're taking someone's child away. Number one, I don't think you should be able to take someone's child away unless they are literally in life-threatening situation, or unless you have a warrant. Well, apparently there was none of that seemed to have been shown, so I take it pretty well that they probably didn't have a warrant. Now, the fact that you bring police there to try to intimidate them, to say don't put up a fight, that's something that, again, you're using law enforcement improperly. So the way that mother, again, she seemed to really care about her child. She was being told by the workers, the case workers, of, oh, just get yourself together. You're getting ready to take her child away, and she's supposed to stop crying. This is not at all appropriate. In addition, since that the little girl was taken away from her mom, she has been transported across the entire state to Jacksonville, 5-6 hours away.
Wow.
And so in order to even see her daughter, she has to go across the state, pay the gas, hotel, and all of that stuff, which is absolutely horrific. Again, okay, there's so many things that are wrong with this case here. So many different things. And that's not the least of them. And now you're saying, okay, in order to have your daughter, you have to basically do what we want you to do. And even when she seemed very like, I've tried things. It's not that I'm refusing treatment. It's like, I'm just doing things differently than what you want me to. And even, I don't know, there's so many layers to this that is just tragic. And there's actually, and also I'll just mention that, as far as our legislature, they need to act. Like, This is a subject that most people, when they think of Department of Children and Families, they think, well, they're always doing the good guys. And a lot of times they are. But what we need is a check and a balance on their power, because the power to take away someone's kids should not be taken lightly. And that should be something reserved for those people who actually are doing the evil acts. And we should treat it just like a criminal case. This is not a civil case like you tripped and fall and hurt your leg. This is a criminal case you're accusing someone of. They need the right to a trial by jury. They need the right to an attorney. They need the right to everything that a criminal accused, again, innocent till proven guilty. So they need to have to prove that you're guilty, that you don't deserve your child. And again, this is something that the rights of a parent with their child, that's the most fundamental right in our country. Our entire government is built on that idea, that notion that, yes, of course, parents have the right to their children, and only in extremely rare situations that are provable, 100% provable beyond a reasonable doubt, that you actually take and break that relationship. Can you imagine saying, Joel, the state's going to come in and say that you can't be married to your wife anymore. I know that you're married to your wife, or I'm going to just take that away because we think that you're neglecting her. Again, and that's another thing. The phrases that they use in child protective services, neglect, that can apply to not just, I'm beating someone up. That's a separate category. But neglect of even financial neglect, medical neglect. And when they say medical neglect, maybe they're not getting the medicine, not that they need, but that the doctor, a specific doctor or nurse, thinks that they have to have. We've seen that thrown around with homeschooling in the past. We've seen that thrown around with certain people who have that medical choice of what vaccines to give their kids. There is just there needs to be accountability. And if we're going to take away your kids, you have to have all the rights of an accused victim, or of an accused, someone who's being prosecuted on a criminal action.
Well, and to your point about the Florida legislature, legislature's already in session. The time for filing bills has come and gone, but I do want to bring everybody's attention. There are two bills that are in the House, and of course they have Senate companions as well. There's a House Bill 475, which is actually sponsored by a representative here in the Panhandle. There's also a House Bill 47 sponsored by Judge Maney in Fort Walton Beach. Now, neither one of those bills has to do with this case. Neither bill has to do with a situation such as this. One bill has to do with special needs children, and finding foster homes for them. Another one has to do with how do you treat children in DCF investigations who have diseases like where their bones are super brittle, and stuff like that. It would be very easy, even though you can't create a new bill at this time, it would be very easy in the first committee stop or the next committee stop for either bill to insert an amendment in either bill saying, look, this medical tyranny, this medical kidnapping is null and void. We are not going to use a mother or a father's desire for a second opinion, or the fact that a parent has questions about a medicine that's only been available in the United States for 6 years. We are not going to allow DCF to use that as a reason to get children away from their parents. And on that note, Nathan, I wanted to give you the last word on this. I started the podcast by referencing one of my old colleagues who's a wild, liberal Democrat there in the Florida House, Anna Eskamani. She made news earlier this week when she called a press conference there in the Capitol building. And the Florida Democrat, she announced that your kids are actually her kids. They don't belong to you. They belong to the greater good. They belong to the state. Of course, it was not in reference to this case, but nevertheless, this is what they believe. So, Nathan, in this particular case, knowing what you know, is Anna Eskamani right? Do we have a lot of work to do here in the free state of Florida?
Well, we definitely have a lot of work to do. And honestly, a lot of it starts with just bringing attention to this issue, that a lot of people have misguided thoughts of, oh, well, they get a jury trial, right? Oh, they should have, due process. No, it's treated totally separately from pretty much every other criminal issue that is in our state. So we have to go back to education. And no, she is definitely wrong. This is not your collective group. This is not a your kids are my kids are your kids. God gave each and every person their own individual children. And that bond, that tie, that parental right is most fundamental to society. Without families, you don't have society. And so ensuring that that is protected, ensuring that everyone who's actually in our legislature understands in it. I think thankfully the state senator or state representative is familiar with this case, and hopefully Nathan Boyles will be able to find legislation that can be, putting the ball in the right direction. And honestly, I'll just say the last thing is the fact that even this case, the judge put a gag order on Joy ZURAFF, the mother, and gag orders in the most in the best sense of the idea is supposed to protect the person being accused of doing the wrong. They're not supposed to protect the prosecutor. They're supposed to protect the defendant. And so, number one, I would contend that from the Florida Constitution, which has a much stronger protection on freedom of speech than even our federal Constitution, it specifically I don't see any loophole for allowing a gag order on a mother just trying to share her side of the story. And so a lot of what we have is either before the gag order came to pass or from, secondhand stories. So if the mother is not able to freely speak, and she has a restraining order on what she can say, that's another problem we have. And I just hope that people pay attention to this, look at what can be done if you're in the legislature, and see what improvements we can make to make sure that everyone, yes, that the criminals are punished properly, that parents don't have kids if they are abusing them, but at the same time that we don't catch good parents in the mix simply because a doctor or a rogue judge thought otherwise, that they had a different opinion of how to raise that child. It's not the government's child, it's your child. And that is where we need to draw the line on it.
Well, I think that's a good note to end on. And I want to once again thank you for your reporting. Thank you for your advocacy. And most importantly, this afternoon, thank you for your optimism. I'm glad to hear that you believe Anna is wrong. I know Anna Eskamani is wrong, and I know that because I believe in this man right here. I believe in America's greatest governor. Like I said, this is the bat signal today. We are shining the bat signal, and we are going to activate the people who need to hear about the ins and outs of what's going on at the deep level that again people wouldn't know, Nathan, unless you were out there pounding the pavement. So I really appreciate it. I'm glad to hear about your optimism because from when I was in the Florida State Legislature, as well as I do, it's not bullshit when we say we live in the free state of Florida. Thank you, Nathan.
Well, appreciate it. And be sure to check out our channel. Follow us on all social media at The Free Floridian.
Appreciate you, brother. Thank you.
Take care.
So, ladies and gentlemen, you have now seen the horrific body cam footage. You've now heard directly from the Free Floridian, who has been outside the Santa Rosa County Courthouse following this case. But now I'd like to welcome a representative from We, the Patriots USA. I'm speaking to Brian Festa. And Brian, I understand that your organization is very interested in what's going on in the Florida Panhandle. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Dr. Redmond. Thank you for having me.
So, Brian, exactly who is your organization? If you wouldn't mind telling us your mission, and if you wouldn't mind telling us the extent to your involvement in this particular case.
Sure. So We the Patriots USA is a nationwide nonprofit law firm. We specialize in the defense of constitutional rights, individual rights and freedoms, as defined in the Constitution, but as given to us by God, as you know. And we take on a wide variety of actions, anything from free speech to religious liberty, to health freedom cases, parental rights cases. We even have Second Amendment right cases. So anything that's basically recorded in our Constitution or that is an individual right, a civil liberty, we will take up the mantle to defend that in court. We also provide high quality education, educational events, both live in-person events and broadcast events throughout the year. So our mission is kind of twofold. And people ask me, yes, we're a law firm, but we have a litigation arm and an education arm. And so we are very staunch defenders of parental rights, because obviously those are very important constitutional rights, really. The right of a parent to direct and guide the upbringing of their children is paramount, and it's actually been recognized by the United States Supreme Court as a right, as a fundamental right. Most recently, in the case of Mahmoud v. Taylor last year, that Maryland schools case with the LGBTQ curriculum that was being pushed on students, and the parents wanted to opt out on the basis of their religious beliefs. And the Supreme Court said parents have a right to direct the upbringing. They have a right to religious freedom. Students have a right to religious freedom. That follows them even into the classroom. So we have a case that's sort of involved in that line of cases right now. But I'm here today to talk about medical kidnapping, which I believe very strongly is a scourge on this nation. And We the Patriots USA has taken up as one of the pillars of its mission the goal of ending medical kidnapping in America. We announced that a little over a year ago, that we were going to work to end medical kidnapping in America. It's something that everyone should be talking about, but hardly anyone is. I'm glad that you are, but there's just not enough people. I think a lot of people are scared, Dr. Redmond, quite frankly, to talk about it because of how deep the corruption runs, and they're scared of backlash and being targeted themselves or having their own children taken away. But we don't live in fear here at We the Patriots USA. And actually, our slogan, if you go to our website, wethepatriotsusa.org, our slogan is, when you stand up to tyrants, we stand up for you.
That is beautiful. That is music to the ears of people in the free state of Florida, Brian. But, you referenced this medical kidnapping. Is that indeed what we're seeing in the Florida Panhandle? And if so, let us know, how common of a problem is this? I mean, is this a Florida Panhandle thing, or is this a nationwide thing?
It's definitely not confined to Florida, and I can talk about in a moment some of the other cases we've taken on in other parts of the country. But yes, this case in particular that you brought me on to discuss is, in my opinion, clearly medical kidnapping. Joy's daughter, KENLEE, cystic fibrosis, you know all about that condition. She was improving. She was gaining weight, as you know, from the evidence I've seen, or what she's told me anyway, what the mother has told me, and all indications are, because you could see it, you said you've watched the video yourself, all indications are that she was in good physical health. She wasn't on oxygen. She wasn't using oxygen. She was running around. She was playing. She had been gaining weight. So there were no physical signs of injury or neglect. It's simply because she chose not to immediately administer a medication that had been recommended or prescribed by this hospital physician. She chose instead, heaven forbid, to do research and to get a second opinion and to see if there were other treatment options available. Every parent should have that right. And while she was researching and looking at different treatment options, just because she did not immediately follow the doctor's orders instantly, her daughter was taken away from her. That should not happen in the United States of America. It shouldn't happen anywhere, but certainly not in the free world, as we like to call it, right? That the leader of the free world is, we're supposed to be the leader here in America, right? So absolutely, that should never, ever happen in the United States, but it does happen. It happens in states like Missouri, where Amanda and Paul Guidry lost all 4 of their minor children back in 2023. We were involved in that case. We provided them with legal representation. Their 6-year-old son, who was nonverbal with autism, was taken from the home along with his 3 other siblings, simply because they had used an alternative treatment method, alternative treatment means to treat him, and he was showing improvement. Again, this is a child that was not physically harmed. He was he was gaining some speech and some motor skills, and by all indications, was doing very, very well in school, in his programming, his special education programming, was showing improvements and progress after they started the treatment. There was absolutely no evidence the child was being harmed, but because it was an alternative medicine treatment, it wasn't what the one pediatrician that they found to say that it could potentially have dangerous side effects, even though there was no evidence it did for him. That was enough for them to take 4 children out of the home, even the children that weren't being treated with that special protocol. So here's the thing: it can happen if you're using a conventional medicine. If you use what is mainstream and conventional, it can happen if you use an alternative treatment. The bottom line is, this isn't about health. This isn't about protecting children. This is about the state's authority, and you defying the state's authority and defying the supposed authority of the doctor. Let me tell you right now, the state doesn't have authority over your children. Doctors don't have authority over your children. You are the primary caretakers and direct the care and upbringing of your children. We saw it in Connecticut. A parent in Connecticut contacted us, my former home state, declined a vaccination. One vaccination. Reported that parent to DCF. They launched an investigation. We were able to get that shut down. By the way, the Guidrys, we got all 4 of those children back into the home within 6 weeks after they were placed in foster care. If anyone knows anything about foster care, that's lightning speed. You do not get a child back in 6 weeks after the state takes custody. We were able to do it. We're going to do everything we can to get KENLEE back home to Joy as well. And it can happen in red states. It happens in blue states. Florida is supposed to be a red state. Idaho, where I am now, is supposed to be a red state. But in 2021, I believe it was, or 22, baby Cyrus was taken from his parents. This went viral. It was all over the world, just because he was supposedly not gaining weight fast enough. The failure to thrive, they say. They literally took him away from the parents in the night. There's body cam footage of that too, in an ambulance. In Idaho, took a child because they believed he wasn't getting proper nourishment. I had someone in Ohio contact me because they took her child away. The state took her child away simply because she didn't want a formula feed. She wanted to be exclusively breastfed. I mean, the list goes on and on. Parents, if you defy your doctors, you literally are risking your children being taken away. And that's not a warning for everybody to just blindly follow whatever their doctors say. That is a warning that we need to step up and do something about it. If people aren't going to do something about it, we need to vote them out of office, and we need to fight back in court. And that's what we're doing here at We the Patriots USA.
Well, and you mentioned a couple things there that really make me very uneasy about this entire situation, because you're correct. I mean, we're not broadcasting from San Francisco. We're not broadcasting from Massachusetts. We are talking about the Florida Panhandle, which is the reddest of the red in a very red state. And as you know, Mr. Festa, you're talking to a doctor who ran as the Freedom Doctor for the Florida House of Representatives. You know, I just left Tallahassee as a state representative, and I wasn't alone. You know, we had a Republican supermajority, Republicans all around this state who claim to represent medical freedom. But yet something like this can happen in Florida, because obviously you're talking about a huge bureaucracy, and you can't possibly know what's going on in Gulf Breeze, Florida. But you know, it just boggles the mind. If this kind of thing is happening in Navarre, Florida, what on earth is the status in places like Illinois, New York, Massachusetts? Any insight there?
Well, I mean, honestly, I haven't seen a huge difference, and that's what's scary about it. You know, a lot of times we run to these safe haven states, as we call them, these what we think are oases of freedom. So we go to Florida, we go to Idaho, we go to Texas, Tennessee, whatever. We think we have these safe havens, these refuges. But in actuality, when it comes to medical kidnapping and CPS, DCF, it's not really any better in the red states than it is in the blue states. They're just as aggressive. They're just as aggressive. And we need to root out the corruption in every state, in every one of these states. You're not any safer necessarily in a red state than you are in a blue state. So with other things you are, like vaccine mandates. Yes, Florida's talked a lot about that. Idaho passed the Medical Freedom Act banning all medical mandates. So yes, with certain things, you're definitely in better shape in states like Florida and Idaho than you are in Massachusetts and New York, but not when it comes to medical kidnapping. I'm sorry to say, I'm sad to say, We have not seen a difference. We have not seen a difference in the case outcomes. We've not seen a difference in the level of aggression. I mean, talk about taking a child away when there's, again, zero evidence of actual physical harm. And in this case, it's my understanding from what Joy's told me anyway. I'm not the lawyer directly involved in the case. Our organization is providing funding, but I'm not privy to the case file or any of the evidence, so I haven't even seen it. But what Joy has told me, as far as what's in the case file, I mean, Joyce obviously told me what happened to her, and I've seen the body cam footage because it was shared publicly. But what she told me is that medication that they wanted her child to be on, Trikafta, has an FDA black box warning, and I looked it up myself. I verified this. Liver failure, death from liver failure, even in patients within the first month of taking it who have no history of liver problems, liver disease. That's scary. And so she did not, she wanted to research this, but in this particular case, the state, after they took her away, it's my understanding, it was almost 4 months after they took KENLEE out of the home before they even started her on the medication. So if that's the reason, that because you didn't immediately start her on this medication, you were placing her in harm, how can they justifiably and reasonably say that when they had custody of her then and didn't immediately start her on the medication? They waited months before they started her on the medication. So if that was placing her at an immediate and imminent risk of harm, is the kind of language they use usually at CPS, DCF, an imminent danger. If that was such an imminent danger not to place her on that medication, then why did you allow the foster family to have her for 3-4 months and not place her on the medication? To me, that's proof positive that there was no harm and she was not placing her daughter at imminent risk of harm, and she should never have been taken away. And the state, here's the thing, I'm going to get really upset about this. The state needs to pay for this. These officials should not have qualified immunity. They should not have any immunity. Anyone who does this to a child, who wrongfully takes them from the home, when there is no actual physical evidence of abuse or neglect and the child's not in imminent danger of harm, should be prosecuted. It should be like filing a false police report. You know how there's mandated reporters? If there's abuse, any kind of abuse or sexual abuse, physical abuse, if you're a mandated reporter, like a teacher or a doctor, you have to report, usually like within 12 hours or something. That's what it was in my former home state of Connecticut. There's mandated reporters, but also if you file a false report saying somebody abused or neglect, that's a felony. So in Connecticut, that's a felony to file a false report. So if somebody is taking a child out of the home and it's later found out that they didn't have substantial evidence to do that, they should be subject to criminal prosecution, whether they're a state official or not. And if the law needs to change in Florida and elsewhere to say that, then that's what needs to happen. And then they'll think twice before they rip these children out of the arms of their mothers while they're crying and gleefully smiling and laughing. You saw the footage. Smiling and laughing as you're entering a home of a mother who's screaming and crying, "Don't take my baby away." Shame on you.
Well, and you bring up some good points there. Here in the state of Florida, I can tell you when I was a legislator, we have what are called public records exemptions, where you can shield people's identities and addresses from a public records search. As a representative, I shielded the members of the military because obviously, we have special ops members that live here in the Panhandle, and we don't want ISIS to do a record search in the state and find out where SEAL Team 6 lives and that sort of thing. But you might be surprised to know that here lately in the Florida legislature, they've been handing out all kinds of public records exemptions, and again, hopefully, my former colleagues will think twice about giving people these protections and providing this sort of blanket immunity. Because as you said, I don't know who it was, but someone has put that YouTube footage of the body cam out on YouTube. And you can see, just as you described, you can see people who are supposed to be working in the best interest of KENLEE, in the best interest of the state of Florida. They are laughing. They are almost trying to provoke or antagonize by the way they're handling the encounter. I mean, to tell someone to gather themselves when you just told them, "Make no mistake, I'm leaving with your daughter tonight." I mean, certainly there needs to be, someone needs to pay for this. But, I wanted to switch gears for a second because this term medical kidnapping, I have to admit, this is a new term. as far as I'm concerned. So now I trained in Daytona Beach back in the late 1990s. To be honest with you, Mr. Festa, I probably haven't reported a parent to DCF since those days. But back, 25 years ago, what would cause Dr. Rudman to report a parent? Well, obvious things. If a kid's got a bruise right here on his cheek where it looks like someone's hit him, right? Black eyes, burn marks that look suspicious. Sometimes we would see the imprint of a hot iron on a child's back. Sometimes we would get testimony from a child in private. Hey, can you please separate me from that? So there are certain things that would provoke a response, and rightly so. But I can't remember, in my experience, any time at all where I ever would have thought, hey, that parent didn't fill their amoxil prescription, let me call DCF. Or that parent requested their records to go to another doctor, let me call DCF and take that kid. That's just such a foreign thought to me. I can give you one more example, and this isn't going too far back. When I grew up, my best friend was a Christian scientist. The Christian Science religion. He had appendicitis, and right up until the moment his appendix burst, his mother would not let the surgeons in our town operate because it was against their religious beliefs. And so what happened during that example? Did my hometown, did they call DCF? Did they get the police in there? No. What a proper physician is supposed to do, you're supposed to make a compelling argument. You're supposed to explain to the patient what you're recommending, why you're recommending it, the risks of doing it, and then the benefits of doing it, and then you let the patient make the decision. So I'm happy to report that in the case of my friend, the mother was convinced, like I said, through proper discussion with the physician, she was convinced to allow the surgery. There was no jail time. There was no taking the kid away from the mother. So can you educate an old doctor? When did times change? When did physicians become so militant about this? Because this, I promise you, this is not the way we were trained.
I have no idea when this happened, why this happened. I do agree with you. We've seen an uptick in these kinds of cases and reports, these incidents in the last, 5-10 years. I wrote a Substack about this. I have a Substack called Free the Law. That's the We the Patriots USA Substack. And I wrote it about this case, about Joy's case, just, I think yesterday. Excuse me. I just published it. And I referenced in there that, yes, this happened in Florida, unbelievably. But remember, the case of Maya Kowalski, the famous Netflix documentary, Take Care of Maya, where she was placed into state custody because, again, the parents were deemed to be not treating her according to what the doctor said. That happened in Florida. That happened in Florida too. And that's like the most famous case right now because that documentary came out in 2023. It blew up. It went viral. Everyone was talking about it. So the idea of medical kidnapping, that kind of was defined by that documentary. So that's a case out of Florida that's considered the, textbook case that you put up there for medical kidnapping happened in the state of Florida. So I'd say Florida is really one of the worst states for this, as far as I'm concerned. That case was just a heinous case, and she won a very large judgment against the hospital. I believe it's on appeal now. We did an interview. It's posted on our website with Deborah Salisbury, the attorney who represented the Kowalski family. I interviewed her. But that was a horrible case. The mother ended up hanging herself, killing herself over this. It's just, the girl lost her mother over this medical kidnapping case. This shouldn't be allowed to happen. Everybody should be outraged, okay? People like me in the legal profession should be outraged. People that work in state government, as I did, not in Florida, but as I did for 15 years, should be outraged. Our elected officials, the governor of Florida, the Surgeon General Ladapo, others, representatives like yourself that, served and are serving currently in the legislature, and senators, everyone should be outraged about this and should be doing something to bring KENLEE home. And that's That's our focus right now. That's our primary objective. Yes, we can talk about being mad. Yes, we can talk about civil suits and prosecution against the agency. We can talk about that later. But the number one objective right now is to bring this girl home. And so we have a fundraiser because obviously, we're a nonprofit, right? We don't charge fees. So when I take a case on, it's not like a typical lawyer-client arrangement where I'm like, okay, here's my fee schedule, here's the retainer agreement, this is what you have to pay me. No, we don't. We don't charge a dime to our clients, and in fact, we provide funding based on the generosity of our donors. So there's a fundraiser there at wethepatriotsusa.org. You'll see it right on the homepage, on that main page, just a little right at the top or a little bit below the top. Scroll down, and you'll see the graphic of KENLEE, and says "Help Bring KENLEE Home," and just click on that. It'll bring you right to the fundraiser. And we'd appreciate if everyone can come together and make a donation. It's only got a $25,000 goal. I say only because that's not much for legal expenses. Anyone who's ever hired a lawyer or has been involved in litigation, especially litigation that could drag on for months or years, 25,000 is usually just a starting point, and it goes up from there. So that may only be a starting point in this litigation, depending on how long this takes for us to get her home. But that is the initial goal. I think when I checked it about an hour ago, we were at the time of this recording probably around like eight to 9,000 out of that 29,000, but we really need to reach that goal. There's another hearing coming up on February 9th, and that hearing is to address the state's motion to terminate Joy's parental rights. And once that happens, folks, it's very hard to get your parental rights back once the state has officially terminated them and the court has ruled to terminate the parental rights. In many cases, that's game over. So we cannot let that happen. We have to fight that. And that's why we need everybody to pitch in and contribute to donate so that we can continue to provide her with this legal representation. Because up until this hearing that just happened last week, was the first part of that hearing, or this past week, she was going pro se. She didn't have an attorney. She was just going into court by herself. And you don't want to fight this fight without an attorney. Trust me.
Well, so here's the thing that I just can't get out of my head. I keep coming back to this, and thank God to whoever put that body cam footage out on YouTube, because now the whole world can see it. I mean, all the legislators that you referred to in Tallahassee can now see with their own eyes. So to me, the body cam footage is so damning. Like I said, the one thing that sticks in my head, this mother, apparently, if you believe DCF, this mother was it was so dangerous. She was not, in their view, they feel like the mother was not properly taking care of KENLEE. She couldn't be trusted to administer medications. But did you notice when they came for KENLEE, the DCF agents and whoever else was there, the social worker, what did they do? They go with mom into mom's kitchen, and they said, Ms. ZURAFF, can you explain what is this? Is this a shot? And Joy, God bless her, I don't know how she kept her composure. She turned over all the medications for KENLEE. She knew every dosage. She knew every indication. She explained to them which things needed to be refrigerated and how often and when they expired. She even knew when the next delivery of medication was coming due to her house. This did not appear to be, at least in my opinion, a mother who couldn't give a crap about her own daughter. This seemed to be a very involved mother, a mother who loved her daughter, who was taking an active role in the health of her family member. I mean, to me, that just destroys their whole argument right there.
I mean, to me, it should be an open and shut case. This child should be back home, in my opinion, based on what I've seen. Okay, I haven't seen anything to contradict that. I haven't seen any indication that this child, again, was an imminent risk of harm or had actually been harmed. No physical injuries, no signs of injury, or abuse, or neglect. In those cases, a child should not be removed. I mean, removal is for cases like you described, where you see broken bones, bruises, hot iron marks. All right, there's clear evidence of abuse, and I'm not talking about every kid gets bruised, scrapes their knee. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about something that looks out of the ordinary. All right, this is, all right, kids can even break bones playing outside. but something that looks like it was caused by abuse. And you can tell as a doctor, you can tell whether this is likely from a fall, playing baseball, or or from climbing a tree or something, or this child was beaten. And doctors are trained, ER docs and stuff, they're trained to look for that. That's different. That kind of situation, we wouldn't be defending her if this was a situation where a child had clear signs of abuse. No. And in that case, there does need to be intervention to protect that child. So I'm not advocating to get rid of CPS altogether. I'm advocating to, all across the country, to clean up the corruption and to make sure the laws protect parents who simply want to do what's in the best interest of their own children, and to have the freedom to choose treatments, to get second opinions, to not have to immediately bow down to whatever the emergency room physician or one physician at one hospital says. You're telling me if a parent walks out the door and says, I want a second opinion, they're going to get DCF called on them?
Well, and that gives us a lot of food for thought. I think this has really opened the eyes of a lot of Floridians and also of a lot of Americans. This term medical kidnapping. Hopefully this is a term that we can bury and put in the ash heap of history, as they say. But, Mr. Festa, before I let you go, one final question. You may or may not know, earlier this week, it was kind of fortuitous. It had nothing to do with this case, but we had one of my former colleagues, a Florida Democrat, Anna Escamani. She happened to call a press conference in the Capitol building earlier this week, where she boldly announced to everyone that in terms of parental rights, your kids are my kids. So in other words, your kids, belong to all of us. They belong to the state. Please tell me she was wrong.
Absolutely.
Do you think Anna Escamani was wrong?
Absolutely, she was wrong. And the children are not property of the state. Children are gifts from God to their parents, and their parents have the primary and sole responsibility to care for them, to protect them, to direct their upbringing. They don't belong to the state. The state has no business stepping in, again, accepting clear cases of abuse or neglect where the child's at imminent risk of harm or has been harmed. All right, that's different. That's a whole different ball game. It's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about a parent who wanted a second opinion, who wanted time to research, who wanted to consider other treatments. Because, by the way, there are other treatments. There are treatments that have been used for cystic fibrosis for decades before Trikafta ever came on the market. So it's not like this was the only treatment option. It's not like there's one treatment option, and if you don't do it, she's going to die. That's not the case here. So they're making it almost out to be the case, but that's not the case. That wasn't the case. So Joy wasn't doing anything neglectful or abusive from everything that I've seen. So please keep her in your prayers. Let's continue to fight for her. Let's continue to fight to bring this little girl home. I can't imagine how it's been for this 7-year-old to be away from her mother all this time. It's just, it's horrific. And thank you so much, Dr. Redmond, for having me on and for speaking out about this, spreading the word so that people know, people locally there in Florida know this is happening in their backyards, and they can stand up, fight back, and help us fight back for her in court.
Well, Mr. Festa, I appreciate you coming on. Again, all thanks to you and everything that your organization, We the Patriots USA, is doing for this poor woman and her family. And, let's hope that we can get KENLEE back where she belongs. And by coming on this show, Mr. Festa, I really appreciate it, because you know what? I'm not in the legislature anymore, but they do still watch me. They do still listen to me. So at this point, if you're in the Florida legislature, you can't say that you were unaware of what's going on. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you. God bless you.
So there you have it. The case of a parent who was so bad at caring for her daughter that when DCF came to take the child in custody, they asked that parent for medical directions and medical instructions. If you ask me, that right there blows their case apart, makes it null and void. Let's all pray for little KENLEE, and let's hope that she is very soon reunited with her mother. I want to thank my guests today, the Free Floridian and Brian Festa with We the Patriots USA. Remember to pitch in and help any way you can at We the Patriots USA. We'll see you next week, and pray for KENLEE.
Train